Oh boy. Oh. You know when we were out in the garden today planting seeds? Well, it reminded me of a story. Once upon a time, there was a woman who longed to have a little tiny baby girl. She wanted the tiniest, cutest, most beautiful little girl to look after. So she'd heard about this old lady who lived in a stone house on the edge of the woods. Yes, and she was an old lady who understood the mysteries of magic. Some people would have called her a witch. But this woman thought the old lady might be able to help her. So she went to see her and she said, I would love to have the tiniest, most cute, darling little girl to look after. I really want one. Can you help me? And the old lady said that she could. She said, take this seed. Yeah, I know, a seed. And plant it in some soil in a flower pot on your windowsill and water it and look after it and see what happens. It was obviously magic. Yes. So the woman took the seed and she planted it and she watered it and she looked after it, and eventually a plant grew and it opened out into the most beautiful flower. Well, I didn't really want a flower, the lady said. I wanted a lovely, adorable little girl. Why have I got a flower? Well, one day she was passing the flower and she sniffed it and a little voice said, hello. And the lady said, what was that? And she looked inside the flower and do you know what she saw? The tiniest, most beautiful little girl. She was so cute. And the lady held her in her hand and she said, oh my goodness, you're my own, very own little girl. You're no bigger than my thumb. Why, I think I'll call you Thumbelina. Yes, it's a good job she wasn't as big as her bum, or she would have had a different name perhaps. Good point. Anyway, Thumbelina was a lovely little wonderful girl to look after. She played on the table all day, she sang songs, and she kept the woman so happy. She was so pleased to have her own darling little girl. Well, as Thumbelina got older, she started to wonder what was outside the house because she'd never been out. So one night she sneaked out through the window and went for a walk across the garden. I know it was a dangerous thing to do because she was very small. Anyway, she was going through the grass and the weeds, and it was like a jungle to her because it was so big, when suddenly a toad popped up. "Ruh, ruh," said the toad. Yes, she's quite a good-looking toad, yeah. She said, "Ruh, you're a nice-looking girl. You'd be a great wife for my son. He's just graduated from Tadpole College, and he's looking for a wife. Come with me." And before Thumbelina could do anything, the toad had grabbed her and run off with her and stuck her on a lily leaf in the middle of the pond. Well, poor Thumbelina couldn't swim, and she was stuck on the leaf. Oh, she wished she'd never left the house. What could she do? She didn't want to marry a toad. I mean, toads are very nice, but I wouldn't want to marry one, would you? No. She cried and cried, but there was a goldfish in the pond, and he'd heard what was going on, and he came up and he nibbled through the stem of the leaf, and Thumbelina floated on the leaf to the other side of the pond. She managed to climb out, and she clambered through the grass until she found some little trees, and there was a hole, and she lived in the little hole in the tree, and she was quite happy actually because it was spring. It was a lovely time of year, and there were lots of nice things to eat. She was happy. One day, a maybug arrived. A maybug, it's a brown beetle with big antennae like that. And he looked at Thumbelina and said, "Ooh, you'd be a nice wife for me." Everybody wants a wife. And the little Thumbelina didn't really want to be a maybug's wife. But the maybug said, "Look, friends, come along and have a look at my new wife. This is going to be my wife." And all his maybug friends came down, but they said, "What? She's only got 2 legs. She's got no antennae. You can't marry her. She's not very nice at all. So the Maybug left her. Anyway, Thumbelina lived quite happily through most of the summer, but then it started to get cooler and cooler. And eventually, she decided she'd better find somewhere better to live. Well, one day she was walking along and she came to a hole in the grass. And she went down the hole and it was a field mouse's house. And the field mouse said that she could stay there if she helped to tidy the place up and make the beds and things. That wasn't hard because the beds were just moss and leaves. And the field mouse said, my friend the mole is looking for a wife. I know another one, yeah, looking for a wife. If you married the mole, you could live down here in his big tunnels and his molehills, and you'd have quite a grand house. Well, Thumbelina wasn't quite sure about that. Anyway, one day, the mole arrived. I've given him glasses because moles can't see very well. He does look nice, yes. Well, he did want to marry Thumbelina. He thought it was a great idea. And he said, you can go through all my tunnels before we get married and have a look around the house. But be careful, there's a dead bird in one of those tunnels. Mind you don't stand on it. Yeah. So Thumbelina went off down the tunnels and she came upon the dead bird. It was a swallow. And he'd been injured and he'd fallen down one of the mole holes. And she put her hand on him. But he wasn't dead. He was still breathing. Yes, and his heart was ticking. Well, she'd seen swallows in the sky eating flies and things. So Thumbelina went out and caught lots of little flies every day. And she fed the swallow and fed the swallow and fed the swallow until he was fit and healthy again. Well, when autumn came, the swallow said, thank you for helping me, but now I have to leave and I have to go back to Africa, which is my home for the winter. Thumbelina was sad. The swallow got ready to go and he said, thank you for helping me. Goodbye. And Thumbelina said, think of me, please, living under the ground, married to the mole. While you're in Africa, I'm going to be in the dark. Anyway, off the swallows went. Off with his friends he went, and she couldn't tell which one was him in the end. They were just little specks in the sky. She turned round very sadly and started to go back down the mole hole, when suddenly she heard a flapping of wings, and she looked round, and it was the swallow. He'd come back. That was good. And he said, would you like to come with me to Africa? It's sunny there and there's lots of exotic, beautiful plants. You might like it. Well, Thumbelina jumped at the chance. She climbed onto his back and held very tightly round his neck. And the swallow flew with all his family and friends all the way over the sea and over different lands to Africa. And when he arrived in Africa, he landed, and there were lots and lots of beautiful flowers all around. And when Thumbelina looked, do you know what was in every flower? A little person. And she said, oh my goodness, I think you've brought me home. And that was a happy ending to the story. Okay? More gardening? Come on then.